Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Shelley Mann, the VP of Marketing from ZIA Consulting, and we're really excited to have you here with us today. In this webinar, Jeremy White from ZIA Consulting is going to give an overview of ZIA's SAP archiving solution, describe the benefits of this solution, and explain what sets our solution apart from others. Before we get started, I did want to say that if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll be sure to cover them at the end. And also, you will be receiving a link to this webinar online when we're finished. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy.
Thank you, Shelley. I thought I'd start with just a brief introduction. My name is Jeremy White, and I look after the SAP and cloud and managed services practices here at ZIA Consulting. My experience kind of goes back quite a ways with SAP. I had my first job working on an SAP implementation in the mid-90s for ConAgra Foods, and ConAgra Foods was in the process of implementing SAP R2 and replacing a bunch of aging financial systems and ERP systems. So after that, I moved over to OpenText, and I spent about a decade at OpenText, and also kind of primarily focusing on SAP and archiving and some of the vendor invoice management things and accounts payable automation. So kind of a long history, I guess, over 25 years now, which seems very strange. That still feels sort of like yesterday. But it's pretty exciting. The interesting thing is that we have not seen, the persistence and the need for SAP archiving continues to persist, and especially with S/4HANA. So I'm excited about today's webinar, where we're going to talk a little bit more about. Let me find my agenda slide here. Talk a little bit more about what is in the ZIA SAP archiving appliance. What are the benefits that are associated with the archiving appliance? And what are the differentiators in the market? So there's a few different archiving technologies and different approaches that you can take. So what I thought I'd do is also spend a little bit of time talking about what the differentiators are between the ZIA and Rocket offering versus what else is on the market. And also mostly because that's largely customer driven. So what we did is, really took a look at and asked the customers, what do they want? What do they want archiving to do? How do they want it to behave? How do they want it to be contracted? And we tried to really follow our customer's lead on how to package this and bundle it to give you the most and really align with what your strategies are. And then also we'll just have a quick wrap-up session, a Q&A at the end, and then also just share a couple of email addresses, etc., so that you can get in touch, and happy to have a one-on-one call with you where I can share a bit more about what we're doing and how we can possibly align with your objectives. So again, thank you for joining, and I thought I'd just kind of dive right in and talk a little bit about what the offering is. So the ZIA SAP archiving appliance is a fully bundled set of applications that we have containerized and built into a software appliance that can be deployed on any of the major clouds, so AWS, Google, Azure. It can also be deployed on-premise if there's a need for that. And where we see that in some instances is customers who are still in the process of developing a roadmap to get to HANA. In some instances, you'll still have ECC version 6 on-premise, and so there might be a need to install the appliance, either temporarily or even long-term on-premise in local data centers. So we can support that strategy as well. So yeah, if you have ECC implementation still on-premise and want to look at archiving content and developing the archiving strategy before moving to HANA or on your journey to HANA. That makes sense. And then we can also take that appliance and redeploy it or replatform on any of the clouds or on any of the major cloud providers as well after that transition is complete. So that's what it is. It's really a containerized set of applications. It's and I'll go through what those are here in just a minute, but it's fully bundled and it's offered as a managed service, so that when we put the container in, it's operating on its own virtual private cloud and in its own subnet. So there's a lot of benefits to that, and that's kind of one of the things that our customers were asking for, is they wanted to still maintain ownership of their application and their data in a place that they feel like, you know, they own the security provisioning on. And so that's one of the differentiators, and I'll talk more about that when we get to the slide that talks about differentiators. So, you know, some of the things that we focus on with the appliance, and that the archiving appliance, or sorry, the archiving solution provides, is a fast time to ROI. And so what I mean by that, and when we're talking about 6 months here, what happens is, in many instances, when you're on your way to HANA, as you know, the pricing for HANA is based on how much data that you're going to put into the HANA database. So what we do is we have an ROI calculator, and we do, you know, the full acquisition of this software and of this appliance is based on ROI. So what we do is we look at your database size, and this is an exercise that we do with you, non-billable. We look at your database size. We look at the number of documents that you have in the SAP environment, as well as the amount of transactions that can be archived. And we base the savings that you will get from not having to license that in SAP. So when I talk about an ROI in 6 months, it's a true ROI, meaning once we hit the 6-month mark, then you are now at that point saving money for you know, for the time that you'll be using the appliance, which is, it's a subscription model, so it'll be, you know, likely 3 years or 6 years or whatever, you know, whatever you choose. But the point is to get a fast ROI for you, and, you know, prevent you from having to license all of that data volume in HANA. So that's kind of what this slide focuses on, is the, you know, the ROI, the cost reduction, and the savings that you'll get from developing an archiving strategy prior to making the move over to HANA. And just to give you a quick snapshot of what that looks like, what we have here, this is a customer that we've worked with in the past. So this is the orange line that you'll see here on the top, and you'll see this key up here at the top of this chart. But what you'll see is this orange line represents what the customer was going to have to pay in order to move their content over to SAP HANA. And that was if they moved all of it over. And what we found is they had approximately 27 terabytes of data still sitting in their ECC system that they had not archived. They also had a bunch of documents that were still sitting in the various cluster tables in SAP as well. So, and then we also looked at what their growth rate was year over year. And so this would have been the initial license cost had they moved all of this data over to HANA, and if they did not develop an archiving strategy. And then what you'll see down here at the very bottom, this yellow line, this represents the cost of the solution. So this is the full appliance cost, which represents the implementation costs, the managed services, as well as all of the infrastructure, you know, related to the appliance. And this is the cost of that over the same 36-month period. Then the blue line, what that represents is what the customer is actually spending with SAP, with HANA, or to license the data in HANA, combined with the cost of the archiving solution. So what you'll see is we, you know, dramatically reduced the increase, you know, for this customer over time. And so this is the type of ROI calculator that we build with our customers non-billable. And so this is, just the chart part. And then it also comes with the detailed part of what the individual costs are and what the individual savings are. And it's also based on an analysis of the DB02 report, as well as a couple of other reports that we run, so that we can get pretty, precise about what we're archiving and what the expected savings is, and make sure that aligns with your approach and objectives. So yeah, just kind of back to those benefits. We talked a lot about kind of cost already. The other piece, and some of these things are, equally as important, which is reducing the SAP database size for a variety of reasons. One is the ingress egress when you're looking at business continuity, depending on whether or not you're going with a SAP private tenant, or if you're going with Rise with SAP. Then also just, the main thing that many of our customers talk about is performance. And so shrinking the database gets us a more performance system. And, in many instances, we're talking about shrinking the database very significantly. So in that example that I was showing you earlier, talking about earlier with the 27 terabytes of data, that's an example of where we can very easily archive about 50% of the data. And when I'm talking about archiving it doesn't mean that it's, offline or unavailable. What we're still able to do is keep this data fully available inside of SAP or connected to SAP, so that you can still re-access the data. And I'll kind of talk about that in a little bit as well. And then the other benefit is, around the backup and recovery time. So again, smaller the database, the faster it is to perform backups, and then also recovery in the event that there's some sort of system outage. And so that's, the cost and the performance, those are the two things that a lot of organizations are focused on. But a couple of other things that are, kind of equally important here are around the ability to perform records management, governance management of the data, and then also just extend the capability of that data beyond how you're currently using it. And so all of the things that you would expect from a records management system are built in to our solutions. So the ability to apply record series indicators, a full file plan, disposition of content based on your disposition schedule, all of that kind of stuff is built in, and that capability is there. The other thing, though, that it allows you to do is have access to this data outside of SAP. And so there's a couple of benefits to that. One is when you think of users who might be at a shipping location or a distribution center who have very specific needs for documents, let's say bill of lading, packing slips, that kind of thing, we can provide access to that outside of SAP so that they don't have to have an SAP license. So just from a cost perspective, it's another way where we can reduce the overall spend by providing access to that content outside of SAP. The other benefit to that is it reduces the number of users and the number of transactions on SAP. So once again, that helps improve performance. And then the third thing that does is it allows you to leverage this data in other systems. So unlike some of the other systems on the market where there's an extra charge or an uplift for API utilization, all of that capability is built into the appliance that we offer. And so if you have line of business applications, or if you're providing third-party access to to folks who need access, maybe shippers, or other organizations or other systems, line of business applications, all of that capability exists within the appliance, and it's like I said, it's all bundled in for the same cost. And then future proofing is just one of the themes that's become really important over the last 5 years, which is the ability to have a professional organization and have the managed service built into the application, so that you don't have to worry about tier 2, tier 3 support, administrative overhead, upgrades, patches. All of that is bundled into the appliance and into the service that's associated with the subscription. So Just a little more detail on what's inside of the appliance. So if we look over here on the top right-hand side, you'll see the name ZIA SAP Archiving Appliance. And then just if we open the hood or kind of double click on that, these are some of the business capabilities that are bundled into the appliance. And this is kind of what I've been touching on. So full content management, the ability to have viewer capability in SAP. So this gives you the ability to do things like perform annotations, redactions, etc. inside of SAP. So what we do is we have a module or a transport actually that goes into SAP, and we replace the view capability for attachments or Fiori tiles for document lists, etc. We replace that with our viewer capability, and our viewer capability is a full viewer technology that offers all of those things such as redaction, annotation, etc. So a lot of extra power, regardless of whether you're in SAP or using our native front-end application. It exists in both places. So SAP users benefit from this technology, but also you can benefit from this technology even if you're accessing that same content outside of SAP. So if you're using the Appliance viewer technology or SAP, both have the same capability. And then some of these other things that we were talking about, like records management, governance, and so on, all of the technical components and the applications are built into the appliance to allow for this type of thing. So data mining, the ability to parse print lists, section break print lists, and provision them, and also provide access, like I was talking about, from other third-party applications into that print list data is all within the capability of the appliance. That's another differentiator. So in most instances, other archiving solutions, they'll allow you to take a print list as it exists in SAP, and you can move it into their archiving server, and you can have access to it, but only as it existed at that time. In other words, the ability to break it up, parse it differently, and even serve it out to other applications typically doesn't exist. But with the technology that we've got integrated here and included in the appliance, we have the capability to fully parse that data, section break it, and provide access to it based on an access control list or based on API calls. So it takes something that's pretty kind of standard and generic in SAP and allows us to really business enable that content without having to do any type of report programming or report creation in SAP. So we can take kind of like a pretty big generic dump of everything that you want in a print list, throw it over into our server, and then we can manipulate it to provide you with more intelligent content outside of SAP. So that's kind of what I'm talking about down here on the bottom right, just in terms of like the double click of what is included in the bill of materials or in the application appliance. And then what you'll see here is the normal integration with SAP. And so we are SAP certified for both ECC as well as S/4HANA, and we're certified for both of the integration methods, so Archive Link as well as IOM. So if you're developing your records retention lifecycle in SAP, we can certainly handle that capability and handle the metadata exchange for that content as well. The other piece that's bundled into the appliance is this piece that you're seeing over here, and this is an SAP transport. It's an ABAP program, and this allows us to do document migration. And what that does is basically it's a technology that scans all of the SAP tables, and it will find any content, documents, attachments that have been stored either accidentally or in many instances on purpose into the SAP cluster tables. And we find that content and we can extract it and move it over to the SAP archive server. And the other benefit of this, and part of what we have built into the managed service, is performing this type of cadence on a regular basis, typically quarterly. For the first year, we might do it monthly. or bi-monthly, but then we would typically move to kind of a quarterly cadence where we would run an analysis on your SAP system to ensure that we're capturing all of the corners and the nooks and crannies where users might find the capability to store attachments or content. And we'll make sure that we set that up and enable it so that moving forward, we pull that content out of the SAP database, but also moving forward, it will just automatically be redirected. So a lot of capability here, and the benefit, as I was talking about kind of right out of the gate, is the ability to deploy into your existing tenant, regardless of which one you chose. So AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, wherever you decide to, if you're doing a private SAP tenant in one of the clouds or using Rise with SAP, we set the appliance inside of your existing tenant. So that's another pretty significant differentiator. It, just peace of mind, puts it under your existing security umbrella. The other thing that it does is gets rid of ingress and egress. So instead of going from one region or one cloud tenant to another one, we're just sitting directly inside of your tenant next to SAP. And that helps improve the performance as well, right? Because we're just a subnet that's registered directly inside of your tenant. Let's see. I'm going to give myself a little time check. I said that I was going to do this relatively quickly, and I have a habit of rambling, so I'm going to try to speed up here a little bit. So just focusing a little bit. So those benefits that we were talking about earlier were kind of some of the business benefits, and I thought I'd just give a little bit of a preview of some of the technical benefits. As I was talking about earlier, certified by SAP. This is one of the most important things. That certification is more than just handing out a certificate. It means that we have gone through the rigor prescribed by SAP on performance standards, also rollback, failover standards, all kinds of things to ensure that the capability and the technology meets their requirements. So certified by SAP for, like I said earlier, both of the integration types, ILM and archive server, and for both of the major platforms, ECC6 and S/4HANA. Low code, so in most instances, we are just using the standard archive link and or ILM integration. We do have a couple of transports that allow us to improve some of the capability. Those transports are not necessarily required, but they are included in the appliance package. And what those allow us to do are a couple of things like seamlessly integrate metadata. So if we want to sync and have bidirectional metadata back and forth between the external platform and SAP, and be able to update from the platform, from the archiving appliance into SAP, the transport allows that configuration. The other thing that the transport will allow us to do is take control of the viewing capability inside of SAP so that we can provide that more robust user experience. And so that means the ability to perform redactions and annotations and that kind of thing. So and these transports all go into their own namespace. So, no issues there from the perspective of adding more work to the basis administrator or ABAP programmers. These transports are part of the managed service, and any updates or upgrades to those are all handled as part of the subscription. So so those are some of the technical benefits. And from a usability perspective, that's, so just kind of going from some of the business benefits down to the technical benefits, and then taking this back up to the usability a little bit. Having the visibility inside of SAP to content, but also externally to to other line of business applications, or even just directly through the appliance portal, means that you can once again kind of start reducing the need to use SAP. Doesn't mean you have to. We do have customers who they have a leading application policy, meaning all user interaction with SAP content has to go through SAP. Totally fine as well. You'll still benefit from the cost reduction as well as the performance reductions. So this is just for those customers that want to provide access to other line of business applications through APIs, or just direct access to solve other use cases, such as out at shipping locations or distribution centers, etc. And what it means when we're talking about automating tasks is we can, obviously configure to use any of the standard ingestion channels. So whether or not you're using Kofax or Effisoft or whatever kind of methods that you're using for ingestion, even if it's some of the direct integrations from bank boxes, etc. What we can do is integrate so that that content comes directly into the SAP archiving appliance first, and then it will create the SAP transaction in SAP, but it never will move the content. So that way, what we're doing is essentially keeping the repository clean from the moment we implement the system moving forward. So instead of moving content into SAP and then moving it back out, what we're doing is changing the process to intercept that content. So if it's, if it's invoices, or if it's things like scanned documents, goods receipt, things like that, what we can do is intercept directly, but then go update the SAP transaction to tell SAP that content has been received. So a lot of different use cases that, I could discuss here, but again, I'm going to try to keep this slightly brief. And then what I thought I'd show you just real quickly, as you know, and this is taking a look at an ECC screen, is, the standard way of creating an attachment. You pull it off of a drive, or it came through an ingestion channel, right? Like Kofax, Tungsten, etc. And then you look at the attachment list, and then the document is here. Well, what that is doing is that's the standard out of the box SAP configuration, but it's using general object service, and it's actually taking that document, breaking it apart, and storing it into clustered tables. It's a terribly inefficient way to do it. And moving into the HANA environment, you definitely do not want to do this because it takes up space, and it also is going to cost a significant amount of money to move that content in. So for those of you who haven't started your journey to HANA, this is a great time to again, we're happy to do that analysis for work with you in a non-billable capacity, run the reports quickly, and show you what we can likely save you to prevent you from having to take all of the licensing costs in your new environment. So just a quick kind of recap. Again, the major things that we're talking about here are performance, improving the performance of SAP by reducing the data volume, also the cost, right? So by taking data out, if we go from 27 terabyte down to 7 terabyte, that is an incredibly significant reduction in what you'll have to license and provision from SAP. Then some of the other benefits, which are more the user benefits and business benefits, kick in, which are around governance, the ability to apply your records management systems, and then also provide line of business application to that content and or to users in a different paradigm. And again, that's more about kind of reducing the amount of change management, also speed, providing a faster method for users to gain access to that information without the sort of more complicated SAP interface. And then, excuse me, some of the other one of the other sort of high level benefits is just the ability to provide better business continuity. And what that means is, again, just shrinking the database size means less time for backup and recovery. But what it also means is, in the event that there's any type of outage, we still have access to all of this content. It's a standalone, the SAP archiving appliance is a standalone platform that will still provide you with access to any of the content that we have in there. So if we have all of the documents in there for, let's say, all of the sales orders are still going to be accessible, even if there's some sort of interruption with SAP. And let's see. So yeah, just wanted to focus a little bit on the differentiators. And as I was saying at the beginning of the presentation, this this set of lists, or this list of items, was 100% customer driven. So what we found when we looked at the market is there was frustration around the way that licensing works for archive vendors. And what I mean by that is customers were frustrated by the contracts, meaning what was governing the licensing. Is it the number of users? Some archive vendors require a one-for-one license for SAP. So if you have 1,000 SAP licenses, you have to have 1,000 archiving licenses. Some vendors charge by the amount of storage or data that you're going to put into the archive. Some vendors only operate as a software as a service, meaning your data is now going to be sitting in their cloud, and you're paying a significant amount for ingress and egress for every transaction to be, traveling back and forth over the pipe. And the other thing is you have to, typically do some sort of significant security review because you're using a software as a service and it's sitting in someone else's cloud. You have to go through that kind of security analysis and usually some sort of audit cadence. The other problem is some of the other archiving vendors, there's difficulty in getting your data back out, meaning if it's in a software as a service, there could be an exorbitant fee to actually, if you decide to discontinue use of that software, to take that content and move it back into your domain. So what we did is basically just listened to all of the issues and complaints and addressed all of them. So the reason that we packaged this as an application appliance and we deploy it into your existing tenant is to eliminate the ingress egress. We also eliminated all data ownership. So you still own your data. This data sits inside of your tenant and it is owned by you. The contract is very clear on that. The other thing is we've eliminated the need for that type of broad security review because, again, we're taking the application appliance and we are putting it into your existing tenant on its own subnet. So because we've created our own VPC and subnet, we actually don't need access to anything else in your network. What we do is we work with you during the implementation to create the integration with SAP, and that's it. So it allows you to continue to keep all of your other applications completely secure and allow us the access to just our VPC and just our application appliance to continue to service it, upgrade it, administer it in accordance with your cadences, but without any of the risk of having access to any other part of your application environment. And then some of the other things that we did that we kind of took this a step further is we said, okay, your data sitting in your cloud, owned by you, reduces the ingress, egress, but it also, we bundled in the API capability so that you can access this content through any other application, and also provide external access to this content if you have those types of use cases. So the ZIA difference with the application appliance is really, we wanted to essentially provide you with full control and full control over your future and what you do with this data, so that there aren't any of these issues about, okay, I started with 5 terabytes, now I'm at 10 terabytes. It doesn't matter. What we do is license this once. It's for a 3-year subscription. You have the ability to renew at the end of 3 years for an additional 3 years, and there's no changes contractually. So we just really, really simplified this and tried to streamline it in accordance with what you had asked us to do. Let's see here. So yeah, just a couple of areas to contemplate on possible next steps is we've got a couple of programs that we run. One of them that I was talking about throughout the webinar today is the non-billable ROI analysis. So this is something, happy to, my email's here as well. So happy to have a quick meeting with you and talk about that more. But basically what that is we have a couple of, we work with you. We have a very simple way. It's through gaining access to the DB02 report. And then also we have a document analysis. It's just a report that we send to you through an SAP transport. And what it will do is go through and find all of the document content that's kind of strewn throughout SAP systems. Then we develop a very clear ROI analysis and pricing strategy for you that, again, we try to target that this will pay for itself and you will have a return on investment starting at the 6-month mark. Excuse me. And then the other thing that we offer in the event that it's needed is a proof to purchase. It's just, essentially like a rapid deployment that we can deploy into your environment. We go through a basic configuration and show you, and essentially just prove to you that the capabilities work that that align with your approach. So whether or not it's document attachments, transaction types, print lists, etc., we configure those and make sure that you're satisfied with the technology and with the appliance prior to making the investment. So yeah, a couple of things there, and we're flexible here, so we've got a lot of different kind of ways that we can go about these two types of programs here, and we're always looking for the best way to accommodate you. And I think that's all I had. So I'm not sure. I didn't pay attention. I've been in full screen mode, so I didn't pay attention to the chat box at all. I don't know if there are any questions, or maybe I've put everyone to sleep by now.
No, we do have a couple questions. And thank you so much for sharing all of this information about our new SAP appliance. We do invite you to hop on our website. It's a very easy navigation to go to the non-billable ROI analysis and 30-day free trial of a prototype connected to your SAP Sandbox environment. But for now, yeah, let's get to those questions. One of the first questions, and actually a couple of people asked this, was you mentioned that this will help improve your SAP performance. Can you go into some more detail about what that means?
Yes. So it's a little bit difficult to explain, but what happens is when you have, let's say, an invoice table in SAP, the out of the box table, I don't remember how many columns it actually has, but I'm gonna speculate and say it has 100 columns, and each one of those columns reserves space inside of the database. So let's say it could be 32 characters, could be, I'm not sure, could be an open field for comments. And anytime SAP has one of those tables, it has to reserve that space, even though you might not be using it. So out of these 100 columns for one invoice, if your organization is, let's say, using 20 of those columns, you've still got these 80 columns that are not being used, that are holding reserved space in the database. And so basically what you're doing is you're licensing to use this space in HANA, even though you're never going to use it, right? Because you're only using 10 of these columns. So what happens is, and when we archive that full piece of that full invoice, which includes all of these 100 columns out of SAP, we give back the space. So what we do is there's a utility that we run that reorgs the database, and it shrinks it. And what that does is it speeds up a whole bunch of things. It speeds up the indexes, because instead of having this reservation of 100 different columns out there, we've taken that whole piece of content out. We've reorganized the database, and it streamlines it and makes it faster. So that's how it does two things. That's how it actually improves the performance, because the database is smaller, the indexes are tighter and more nimble, but it also just shrunk the database very dramatically, which means we've reduced the cost dramatically. And I'm happy to spend more time and show folks if anybody's interested. And again, my email's there, and can jump online and walk them through how that actually works.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. And then another question we have here is, what's the typical implementation timeline, and how much time would a company need to invest over time?
This one's much simpler. So never more than 6 months. And let me explain why. The appliance is already built. And so that part we deploy in your cloud of choice, and there's a configuration that happens with SAP. So that part is pretty straightforward. The other piece is the analysis to determine how are we going to get you to the ROI. So remember, even before you make a purchase decision, we have already analyzed your DB02 report. We have already found what the top tables are that we want to have some sort of archiving strategy for. So let's say they're FI documents. Well, we know that documents have to be business complete. And so we will perform that analysis ahead of time and say, okay, out of the FI documents, it looks like we can archive about 20% of them. The other 80% are going to need to stay in SAP and because they're not business complete. So we're already going to have a really, really honed in idea of exactly which tables and how much content out of those tables we need to get out in order to hit your ROI in 6 months. So it doesn't mean that the project's over. If you want to continue on, and if we want to find more savings, or if you have new use cases beyond the 6 months, that's fine. You're totally welcome to use the software. We're happy to help you continue to leverage it into a phase 2, phase 3. But what we want to do is very quickly hit an ROI within 6 months so that the full application implementation, infrastructure, everything has paid for itself. And now what you're doing is from the 6 month mark moving forward, you're using saved funds to fund new implementations of incremental business value. So that way you're basically never having to go get new funding, right? You're basically, this implementation is paid for, and you're now finding ways to fund projects by just savings. And in terms of how much work is involved, so again, no technology work, right? We take care of all the infrastructure, the setup for you. There is some interaction with the basis administrator to work with us to handle the initial integration. And then probably one of your, probably the basis administrator or one of your SAP BAs, just to work with us to ensure that we have the right print list, we've provided the right access, and that we've also got the right archiving strategy for those various tables that are in DB02 that are kind of the highest net worth tables in terms of providing savings. So I know I said that was an easy answer, and then I made it long-winded. But you know, the summary of that is never more than 6 months, very minimal interaction. It's just a matter of kind of, yeah, getting to the ROI quickly, and then you decide where you want us to take it from there.
Awesome. Good. Well, thank you so much. Thanks again for sharing this. For those of you that are on the webinar, that's all our questions for today. So we really appreciate the time you took out of your day to join us. And we will be sharing a link to the webinar with you in a follow-up email after the webinar. And it will probably be available fairly soon on our website as well. So again, Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing. And thank you to all of our attendees for being here with us today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Great. Thanks for coming, everyone. Bye-bye.